Good evening, everyone. I am Richard Brown coming to you live from Tacoma Park, Maryland. This is the DMV NFL Show Podcast, and today I have a very special guest. His name is Brandon Hoover. He is a local actor, and he's a diehard Pittsburgh Steelers fan. Brandon, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
All right, cool. So, what were your thoughts of the wild card game against Cincinnati? It was a really, really chippy game from what I saw of it. A lot of penalties, a lot of bad blood.
Well, I think a lot of the emotions were covered in that game, like anger, disbelief. I mean, I don't know if anyone can really summarize what they saw that night. It was just incredible. I can't imagine a worse way to lose a game for Cincinnati or a more satisfying way to win a game for Pittsburgh.
And it looked pretty glum for you guys because, Roethlisberger got knocked out early. And it didn't really, to me, it didn't really look like that hard of a hit from that perfect put on his shoulder. But, what really shocked me was when he was on the card, the Cincinnati fans were throwing water bottles at him. That's just the ultimate sign of disrespect right there.
That was a disgrace for the fans of Cincinnati, but it wasn't all of them. You always have a few knuckleheads that do stuff like that. I've been to games in Cincinnati, baseball games, and the fans are nothing, but respectful. That was, a rare occurrence. So
yeah, because the last time I saw something like that was Bottlegate. Remember that in Cleveland, early 2002, when they reviewed the previous play before the ball was snapped, and they ruled it an incomplete pass, and it cost Cleveland a playoff berth. And I think that was the last game where they stopped serving glass bottles. Because they just pelted the officials with them.
Well, it's just unfortunate. It looks bad for the city, the team, the NFL. It's not a few people throwing things, but it was, like when Antonio Brown got hurt and people were cheering, and you had the one guy yell, "I hope he's dead." That's beyond the sport.
And then that's unfortunate because, I thought we had, in Sports Evolve, because there's going to be guys that chirp and stuff like that, but to cheer for somebody getting hurt, that's just... that puts classes on a whole new level.
Yeah, and I don't know if that reflects the entire city of Cincinnati. Just a small story.
It's like you said, probably a select few fans, but it's still unfortunate. And speaking of Antonio Brown, I saw a report today that he's still going through the concussion protocol, but I don't know. I don't know what Adam Pac-Man Jones is saying. I saw the hit; it was nasty.
Well, I think the one thing that has been overlooked a little bit is that when Brown was hurt and when they finally got him to his feet, Burfict went over and patted him on the shoulder before the coach smacked his hand away. Like, what are you doing? So that says to me, Burfict knew he hit him. So what Pac-Man saying he's faking the level of injury or it didn't happen? It happened. He's in the concussion protocol. Whether he plays or not, he's still hurt. So Pac-Man's clearly out of line there.
Do you think Antonio Brown will play against Denver?
I think he will play. There's some conflicting reports. Nationally, they're saying it doesn't look good. From what I've read out of the Pittsburgh reports is that nothing's been ruled out yet, but they think he's going to play. So,
and and then another person that Roethlisberger got hurt. He had they're saying he had a torn ligaments in his shoulder and a sprained AC joint. You do need him to compete with the Broncos. Because seeing Landry Jones, Landry Jones looked skittish in the pocket. He didn't really set his feet quite right. Landry Jones played well in a couple of games this year, but I think in big games, going back to his days at Oklahoma, he just falters.
Well, I think it was an interesting game for him to come into. He looked really good against Arizona when they won that game and looked bad against Kansas City. But to come into the Cincinnati game with the emotions as high as they were, a steady downpour, I'm not trying to make excuses, but I'm saying it wasn't a typical quarterback coming off the bench. There was a lot of things at play. But he did look bad, and I think as you said, they need Ben to beat Denver.
And we'll get more into game picks later, but I think that Denver game coming up, that's going to be a really good game. And that Denver's going to be geeked up to play because of what happened in the regular season with you guys.
Oh, absolutely. They're playing at home. Manning's back. They should be expected to play, especially with Pittsburgh as banged up as they are. They'll compete. It'll be a good game.
All right. Okay, and then other big news going on right now is the NFL moving back to LA. They voted 30-2 in Houston to return the Rams to Los Angeles. They moved in St. Louis in 1995 after being in LA for 48 years. So they will be back. The deal also allows the Chargers to move to LA. They have until the deadline of the conclusion of the owners' meetings to decide if they want to move. The Raiders were in talks. They withdrew their application. They're looking for a new stadium, probably in the Oakland area. And if the Chargers decide not to move, Oakland will then be given that 1-year option to join the Rams in LA. And it looks like that whatever team decides to move to LA with the Rams is either going to be an equal partner or just a tenant in that stadium. And right now they're looking at having the stadium in Inglewood. We don't know if it's going to be done or not, but there's talks about the LA Coliseum, being able to house a team in the NFL temporarily. But what are your thoughts on this move back to LA? I'm not terribly crazy about it.
Well, to me, I like the Raiders in Oakland. Anyway, so I hope they stay there. But as far as the Rams moving back, I'm okay with that. The Chargers, I guess my question is, why does it have to be two teams when it didn't work before? What's changed to make people think that two teams will work now?
And exactly. I mean, my thing with LA is that it's more of a basketball town, and I mean the LA Rams are good there, but they like after George Allen left there to go to the Redskins, and they had Chuck Knox, and then in the 80s, when they had Eric Dickerson running the ball and stuff like that, and when they drafted Jim Everett, there was a lot of buzz, but my thing is like they played, when the Raiders were there, they played with sparse crowds. Everyone's going there to watch the Clippers. Everyone in LA wants to see the Clippers play. And I just don't know from a marketability standpoint how this is going to work out. When St. Louis tried to keep the Rams in St. Louis, they offered $1.1 billion, to build them a new stadium. But Stan Kroenke was hell bent on bringing them back to LA because he liked the area there. I mean, LA has got college football, USC, UCLA. I think probably what would have been a better option is maybe an expansion team.
Yeah, that's another thing to consider. The NFL talks about expanding a lot. I think Los Angeles is a market that if you win, you're a god, and if you don't, nobody comes out to see. There's too many other things going on in that city. Not to mention you also have the Dodgers, Angels, the basketball teams, the college football teams.
The Lakers too, yeah.
Yeah, there's so many things to do in LA, and I think LA is a lot of transplant people. So you have people there with already allegiances to other teams. So I think that affects it. If you're not winning, I wouldn't expect large crowds or anything. But
and in the St. Louis Rams, they still have some pieces they have to get. The LA Rams now. God, it's going to be taking me time to get used to saying that again. But there are a couple they still need pieces to be a playoff contender. And if the Chargers go there, they got to get healthy, and they still have some pieces they need to get. So, like you said, if they don't win right away, what's going to happen?
Right. And the Chargers window might be starting to narrow a little bit with Phil Rivers getting older.
Exactly.
And like you said, the Rams have some pieces, but Aaron Donald, Pitt guy, defensive player of the year, I believe. They can compete. It's a tough division, but I'm interested to see how they do in Los Angeles.
In the LA Coliseum, it's housed NFL teams before, so it would be good enough until they can finish the stadium in Inglewood. But people go to the Coliseum to see USC play and stuff like that. I'm very skeptical by this move. I thought when they were talking about moving to LA, I thought it wasn't going to pass. But apparently a lot of owners want to see football in LA, and I wouldn't be surprised if, let's say the Chargers did move to LA. I wouldn't be surprised if they were back in San Diego within 5 years. Because the city of San Diego is absolutely devastated right now. And I was watching NFL Network the other day, and LaDainian Tomlinson was saying that the city, the San Diego Chargers fans are just absolutely devastated that they're not going to be able to go to Qualcomm Stadium and see their team again. And then Qualcomm Stadium's old. It's been around for 49 years.
Yeah.
There were maintenance issues. That kind of like what happened in Philadelphia with Veterans Stadium. That was starting to fall apart. In the early 2000s, and they tore that down, and now they're in Lincoln Financial Field. But the city of San Diego, they just couldn't get the votes to pass in building a new stadium there. So, I mean, again, the Spanos family, they have a couple of months to decide, but I think it's sort of a foregone conclusion that the Chargers will probably move, but I think the Raiders will probably stay in Oakland.
Yeah, I hope so. To me, it's the Oakland Raiders. Just thinking back to like the Steelers Raiders rivalry in the '70s, they just seem like they're Oakland. They're tough. It doesn't work for me in LA with them. My question too is, where does Jacksonville fit into all this? Because they've been talking about moving that team for years.
And Shad Khan, the owner of the Jaguars, came out and said that they had no plans, to move the Jaguars. And, and if in the city of Jacksonville, it's the economy down there is not very good right now.
Right.
And, and they don't really play, around big crowds nowadays. But, I mean, this past season, they've actually gotten some decent crowds, with Bortles playing well and stuff like that. But I just feel like, the Jaguars should remain in Jacksonville. The Los Angeles Jaguars, that doesn't have a really good ring to it, do you think?
No. But, hey, the Lakers were from Minneapolis, so yeah. There's no lakes in L.A.
And the Brooklyn Dodgers, that had a nice thing to it. Now they've been the Los Angeles Dodgers for, 70 years?
Yeah, it's forever.
I mean, I don't know. I think right now the Rams and the Chargers will probably be in L.A. I don't know if there's talk of any more teams joining them. I think they're probably going to have to see going down the road what that's going to be like.
Yeah, like I said, hopefully, it works out better. I just wondered why they had to have two teams when, why not try with one, see what happens, given what happened last time where everybody left, and there's been no football in L.A. for, 15 years, 20 years. So, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah. All right. And then we have other big news today coming out of Cleveland. Hugh Jackson, who was the offensive coordinator in Cincinnati, is now the new head coach. It's the 9th Browns coach since they came back into the league in 1999 as an expansion team. And he will take over from Mike Pedden. He also had interest from the Giants and 49ers. And a report came out that Jimmy Haslam was going to give him significant personnel control over the roster. People also remember his time with the Raiders when he was the head coach there in 2011. They went 8-8. They had a good divisional record. They went down to the wire for the division title, but ultimately Denver got it. What do you think of this move?
I like it. I'm a Hugh Jackson fan. I think he'll do all right. The problem in Cleveland, I believe, over the years has been the draft, and you're only as good as your quarterback. Two things they've done poorly at. They haven't drafted well, and they haven't developed a franchise quarterback. You have to look no further than next weekend. You got 7 of the 8 quarterbacks are top-of-the-line NFL quarterbacks.
Absolutely.
And you could throw Alex Smith in there at this point.
He was a first-round pick,
Yeah. But Cleveland has never had that.
And then you go back to when they came back as an expansion team. They drafted Tim Couch, and that didn't work out, because all the injuries and stuff, and then they brought in Jeff Garcia. That didn't really work out. They drafted Brady Quinn, and Johnny Manziel. They had Jason Campbell for a while. He was okay. They've never had, like you said, they've never had consistent quarterback play. But the good thing about Hugh Jackson that I've noticed is he's really, really good with quarterbacks. And he was the Ravens quarterback coach when Flacco was drafted. I think he was really integral in, bringing him up to speed in the NFL. And then he got hired by Tom Cable to be the offensive coordinator in Oakland. They also went 8-8 when Jackson was the coordinator there. Remember, they had Jason Campbell, and he had some good games with Hugh Jackson. But then there was the trade for Carson Palmer, and I think he sort of reinvigorated him, and what he's done with Andy Dalton the last couple of years. And then, A.J. McCarron, too. We can't forget what he's done with A.J. McCarron. But, now comes up the question, what's happening with Johnny Football? It looks like he'll probably be out.
I would think as a new coach coming in, you probably don't want Johnny Football as a distraction your first year, if I was making the decision. But then, like you said, Hugh Jackson's good with quarterbacks. Is he the guy that can put Johnny Football together? And I'm not that down on Manziel. I thought he showed some stuff last year. We saw him play against Pittsburgh, Seattle. Like he did okay at times. He's not consistent, but he didn't play a consistent level either. So,
And the Cleveland Browns don't exactly have offensive weapons anymore because, Josh Gordon's been suspended. And I like Travis Benjamin, but he's not that, blow you over the top of a defense deep threat. I thought Gary Barnidge did some good things, and Manziel, like you said, the Pittsburgh game, he threw for almost 400 yards, but they only scored 3 points,
Yeah.
I mean, my concern with Manziel is his off-the-field issues, he had the problems with alcohol and then, beating his girlfriend. Then he went into rehab. That didn't work out now. There was that picture of him online where, there was reports that he was in Vegas, but he was at his home with his dog. And, we don't know whether that was at home or in one of those, big-time Vegas hotels, And Hugh Jackson, he's a player's coach, but he's also one of the guys who's not afraid to drop the hammer on you, You remember that infamous, speech he gave the Raiders, his last game when they lost to the Chargers and it cost them the playoffs. He said that they needed an attitude adjustment there. And, I was under the impression that he was going to be there. But, Reggie McKenzie made the move and hired Dennis Allen.
Yeah. I mean, Hugh Jackson, he is a winner. He's been a part of some really good coaching staffs, Baltimore, Cincinnati. I think he'll do okay in Cleveland. But like you said, it's going to come down to quarterback play and what they do with Manziel.
And I think he's going to change the offense. He does a lot of gadget plays. So, I think a guy like Travis Benjamin could do well. Maybe if Josh Gordon gets his head on right. I think Cleveland has got a defensive foundation set. They have some good players, and they're getting, Joe Hayden back from injury because he was out for most of the year. They have Deshaun Gibson, who's a good safety. Craig Robertson, a lot of those great players. But, my concern is Jimmy Haslam really going to give him that control? Because he's an owner, kind of like Daniel Snyder that meddles. Although Snyder's doing a better job, bringing in Scott McCloughan. But, Jimmy Haslam meddles, and it'll be interesting to see who they bring in as a general manager, if he's going to report to Hugh Jackson or if Hugh Jackson's going to get some control and going to have to report to the new GM. It's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you should be able to have some say over the players you're going to end up with. Of course, it didn't work out in Philadelphia for Chip Kelly and blowing up the roster and trying to bring in his guys. But I don't think you need to have that happen, but you have to have some say. And as long as, Hugh Jackson can bring in the guys he wants with the right attitudes, I think he'll be okay.
All right. Well, we're going to take a break right now. When we get back, we'll be recapping the wild card games from over the weekend, and then we're going to talk about some upcoming news in the NFL. We'll be right back. All right, we're back, and now we're going to get into the recap of the wild card games. And the first one we're going to recap is the Chiefs at the Texans. And I'm not going to lie to you, I did not see this score coming. I thought it was going to be, because Kansas City had played Houston early in the year, week 1. They beat them 27-20. Brian Hoyer struggled that game too, and they pulled him for Mallet. But this one, Kansas City just dominated from the start and didn't let up. And, Hoyer was absolutely catastrophic.
Yeah. That might be an understatement, actually. 5 turnovers. You can't do that at any level of football. Pee-wee football, you're going to get blown out if you do that.
Yeah, and Bill O'Brien spoke during his press conference, said didn't even cross his mind once to pull him, and Brandon, the thought of pulling somebody for Brandon Weeden, people will squirm at that notion, but Weeden actually did pretty well with Houston. I think they should have given him a shot.
Yeah, I don't know. Like it never crossed his mind to pull Hoyer. Maybe that speaks to the confidence he actually had in Weeden against the Kansas City defense. But you live and die with your decisions. And Hoyer played one of the worst games.
He played a Jake Delhomme-like game. Remember Jake Delhomme back in 2008, 5 interceptions against the Cardinals?
Yeah.
I think Hoyer will probably be gone next year. And, Kansas City right now, we can't rave enough about them. They've won 11 straight because everybody left them for dead.
Yeah.
After starting 1-5, and then they beat Pittsburgh. And they just got on a tear.
Yeah. Kansas City's a solid football team. Even without Charles, they're still winning. They win with defense, and I don't know if people still want to think of Alex Smith as a game manager. I really like that term. But the guy doesn't turn the ball over, and he does what he needs to do.
And he's been starting to throw the ball downfield, with, Jeremy Maclin. I mean, I know Jeremy Maclin's hurt right now. We'll see. He's day-to-day right now with a high ankle sprain. But, he's been taking chances, and Travis Kelce caught 128 receiving yards worth of balls, and, I mean, they pressure your quarterback. And now that they have a stud cornerback there in Marcus Peters, you got to hold the ball for an extra second against those pass rushers. And now that their first-round pick from last year, D Ford, is catching on, good luck trying to block these guys, And but I think the big thing right now for Houston is getting a franchise quarterback.
Oh, yeah, definitely. You have to have a franchise quarterback in the NFL to advance in the playoffs and win a Super Bowl. And as close as Houston's got was, Matt Schaub, maybe a couple years ago. The guys that they're running out there now, like Hoyer, Whedon, Savage, that's not going to work. I think they definitely need to draft or trade. I hear there's some quarterbacks available.
Yeah, like, RG3's been linked to them. I mean, I don't know, if he would necessarily be a fit. Bill O'Brien runs the kind of system that Tom Brady ran New England, because Bill O'Brien was Tom Brady's offensive coordinator. I think it's safe to say Hoyer's not going to be back. I was never high on Tom Savage.
As a Pitt fan, watching him play at Pitt, he looks like an NFL quarterback with the size and the arm strength, but he does make some questionable decisions. I could see him as a backup, a solid backup, come in and give you a good game or two. I don't think you're going to win a Super Bowl with Tom Savage.
And I think Robert Griffin III, I mean, they have some weapons on offense. Maybe if he does well in that system, I mean, Kirk Cousins is out there. I mean, I don't think he's going to leave Washington, but Colin Kaepernick has been linked too. I mean, but Houston needs a quarterback to get over that hump. But I think bottom line about that game is Kansas City just wanted it more.
Yeah, a lot more.
And then, next game, the Steelers game, we touched on it briefly earlier in the segment about all the penalties and Roethlisberger and Brown being hurt. But, I mean, I think the big question everyone's going to ask is Marvin Lewis going to be gone? Because I was watching NFL Network the other day, and, there were some analysts, saying that he's, been to the playoffs 5 or 6 years, and he's lost every single one in the first round. And they've always had great teams.
Yeah, they've had this roster is probably his most talented roster. I don't think you get rid of the guy, though. For all intents and purposes, they had that game won. And the actions of two guys, two selfish players, really cost them that game. I mean, that was one of the most improbable finals you'll ever see. So to put that on Marvin Lewis, I mean,
my thing, though, is that he made no effort to go out there and control his guys. He just stood there on the sideline with his arms across his chest.
Well, I would say, these are professional athletes. Like I said, Pac-Man Jones, 32 years old. You shouldn't have to babysit them, even on the field. These guys should be able to play within the parameters of the game, and that didn't happen. And Pac-Man Jones, they're two players with a history of this. I mean, Burfict goes back to college when Dennis Erickson, his coach at Arizona State, benched him because of personal fouls. Pac-Man, from West Virginia to Tennessee, Dallas, had a lot of off-the-field issues. A lot of them seem to start with, quote, heated arguments. So these are two guys that haven't been controlled previously. And to put that on Marvin Lewis, I don't know. At some point you have to grow up. You have to be a professional and realize the stakes and not do something stupid.
I mean, and the other thing, too, is, I mean, he just doesn't win the playoffs. And, it's like we said, he has a loaded team every single year. I mean, you look at other coaches, Bill Belichick, when he had his, good teams in New England. I mean, they won the Super Bowl last year, but but they weren't talent-wise as good as they've been in the past. They always won the playoffs. They won when it counted, and even when, in Philadelphia, they had talented teams. They won playoff games, and then finally they got that one stud player and they got, to a Super Bowl, but obviously they fell to the Patriots. But I don't know. I'm just not Marvin Lewis to me. I don't think he has, that it factor in him, to really get guys geeked up for big games. I mean, nobody can question his regular season.
No. But you'd almost think, though, the law of averages, the guy's going to win a playoff game. If you remember how bad Cincinnati was before Marvin Lewis, and can you improve on that? I mean, like I said, Marvin Lewis probably will eventually win a playoff game if he stays there. But you got to wonder, is the next guy going to be able to move you forward, or are you going to take a step back? Philadelphia cutting ties with Andy Reid. Brought in Chip Kelly. 3 years he's gone. The roster's depleted. And Andy Reid's still playing out in Kansas City, this weekend. So I always wonder, you have to weigh it. Like, is it going to be a step forward or a step back? And if you got a guy that can win, I think you stay with him.
I mean, and there was like a lot of announcers are speculating that, if Marvin Lewis did get let go, Hugh Jackson would take over. Well, that's no longer the case. They'll be coaching against each other. So that'll be interesting to see next year. But, another game that a lot of people talked about, too, was the Seahawks at Minnesota. If you're going to lose a game in heartbreaking fashion, that's probably the worst way to do it.
That's crushing. I felt really bad for Blair Walsh, just because the stuff that's going to be out there, Twitter, the social media, like, people already wishing he's dead and this and that. And you hate to see that happen because the guy seems like a good guy. He missed the field goal.
I mean, when he made 33 out of 35 field goals this year, he was pretty good, But, I mean, even though the laces were in, and that's really not where you want to place the ball,
No.
I know a lot of people are, quoting Ray Finkel and Ace Ventura and all that. But
Immediately.
I mean, it wasn't even close.
No, it was a choke job.
I mean, it's like Mike Zimmer said, you got to make those chip shot kicks.
Right.
And, the Minnesota Vikings have to develop their downfield passing game. I mean, I know they don't have the receivers yet. I mean, but, they had that receiver Johnson last year who was starting to catch on. They have Cordell Patterson who's talented, but I don't know what's going on with him. Stephon Diggs really came out this year.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, Mike Wallace, you would probably know he used to play for the Steelers.
One-trick pony. Just run downfield and throw it to him.
And they traded for him from Miami, so they got to eat all that salary. But, my thing, I'm not really high on Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, he played in a pro-style offense at Louisville, but he seems very hesitant, to throw the ball downfield. He doesn't take a lot of chances.
Well, I haven't seen a lot of his Vikings games. The Seattle secondary could have something to do with that. Maybe he was a little bit intimidated, trying not to do what Brian Hoyer did, turn the ball over 5 times to those guys, and so played it conservatively. But, we talk about the Bridgewater and the missed kick, but, it was Peterson's fumble that kind of set the stage.
Yeah, and Minnesota played great defense.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew this game was going to be close. I mean, because early in the year, they absolutely schooled Minnesota, but Minnesota was without Anthony Barr, Linval Joseph, and Harrison Smith. Those are 3 key cogs, and they had them all back, and they just, like, Wilson was running for his life.
Yeah.
A lot of people, forget how great of a job Minnesota's defense did, and I think Minnesota's going to bounce back. I think they're a good team. I like Mike Zimmer, and we saw what he did in Cincinnati with that defense, bringing him basically from nothing. I think they were 28th in 2007, the year before he got there, and then his first year got him to 12th, and then they went up to 8th, and then up to 4th. I mean, they just kept climbing.
Yeah.
My thing about Seattle is that they got a lot to clean up, or they're going to be done next week.
Yeah, be interesting to see if Marshawn Lynch comes back. But you're right. They're going to have to play a lot better. Those weren't ideal field conditions either, sub-zero temperatures.
And from what I heard, like every time people hit the ground, it was like hitting cement.
Yeah. So that's why I expected a low-scoring game. Not quite 10-9, but Seattle does bounce back though.
I mean, yeah, but we'll see what happens. But then the last one was Packers at the Redskins. I was actually at this game.
Oh, okay.
I sat in the skybox, watched it from afar. And I thought early on, the Redskins were going to beat the brakes off them because they were up 11-0, got a safety, and then, I think that Deshaun not getting that touchdown, I think that sort of kind of turned the game a little bit, and Green Bay sort of got going a little bit. I thought Cousins played pretty well. He threw the ball 46 times, completed about 27 passes for 320 yards, no interceptions, threw a touchdown. He had that costly fumble though. But what really with the story of the game was Green Bay just blew by the offensive line like Swiss cheese. 6 sacks.
Yeah. Well, for his first playoff game, Kirk Cousins, not too bad. I mean, Green Bay is a veteran team. Um, they've been there before, and to come into Washington, I think most people thought they would probably win the game. But like you said, Cousins was respectable. Redskins have nothing to be ashamed of at all this season. They came
Oh,
out of
absolutely.
nowhere.
I mean, everybody thought they were going to finish last, and Jay
Right.
Gruden basically used that as a rallying cry and said, "This is what they think of us. Let's go get them."
Right.
And I like Gruden. I think he's the right coach for him right now. Green Bay, even though everyone says their offense miraculously came back, I don't really agree with that statement. I thought they were a little sloppy.
Yeah, I think they're up and down. They're definitely beatable. They're not the Packers of a few years ago where you thought, they would just step on the field and score 30, 35 points. You can beat that offense now. Whether it has anything to do with Rodgers and Olivia Munn or not, I don't know, as they were saying. But I don't know. It doesn't look the same. They're just a little bit out of sync.
And I think a lot of that's to do with Jordy Nelson not being there.
Yeah.
And there were plays where Rodgers was flat out scared in the pocket. And there were plays where Cousins was also scared in the pocket. It just I think that the score is very deceiving. I don't think Green Bay dominated like people thought they did. I was there.
Right.
It got physical a couple times, but the Green Bay Packers started using that no huddle, and it got the Redskins a couple times, in the 12-man, defense that they flagged them for.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, the Redskins, they were expected to finish last and to host the playoff game, in that division. I think they have a pretty good future in front of them. And I think it's important to note, too, probably talk about it later, but how RG3 didn't allow his situation to become a distraction at all for that team. I think that says a lot about him.
Now, going on to RG3, where do you think he'll end up next year?
Right now, I have no idea. I mean, Dallas seems like they're linked to Manziel, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've heard, like we already talked about Houston. I think RG3 is going to can be a good quarterback somewhere in the right system. But as far as where, St. Louis?
St. Louis could be one spot. That would be very ironic because considering that we traded a whole bunch of picks for, to move up to their spot to draft them. I think the New York Jets might be a possible landing spot. Fitzpatrick, there's no guarantee they'll bring him back because of that loss to Buffalo that kind of knocked him out of the playoffs.
What about Geno Smith, though?
My thing with Geno is he has his head up his ass sometimes.
Yeah.
And, the other thing, too, about him is that he's kind of immature, what happened with, Impanali in the locker room. And he folds under pressure. Like, there's games where he plays fantastic, In 2014, at the end of the year against Miami, he threw for 350 yards and 4 touchdowns. But there's games where against the Bills, he's 3 of 7 for 20 yards and 4 interceptions,
Yeah.
I'm not saying Robert Griffin could be an upgrade, but Cleveland is another spot.
Yeah, I was just going to say Cleveland. Buffalo? Are they that sold on Tyrod Taylor?
Tyrod Taylor was completed close to 70% of his passes, and he had a high quarterback rating. They lost because their defense, which is shocking.
Yeah, with the Rex Ryan defense.
With all that talent, and you've got other teams, maybe they bring him to Chicago, have him back up Cutler.
That would be interesting.
Maybe they bring him to Minnesota to back up Bridgewater and push him a little bit, and Philadelphia.
Yeah. Philadelphia's there's places for RG3 to go, and like I said,
maybe the Steelers be Roethlisberger's backup, push Landry Jones.
I can't imagine that. I don't know. The Steelers have made some interesting, bringing in Mike Vick, of course, years ago, Byron Leftwich. I don't see RG3 as a backup though. I think he's going to go somewhere with a chance to compete to start. What about Miami? They were pretty down on Tannehill this year.
They just paid him a boatload of money too.
There's places. There's probably 10 legitimate places for him to go. I don't know. Dallas would be all right, I think. But like I said, it seems like they want Manziel. Romo's got to be, 35, coming off another back injury. So, I don't know. RG3 will be somewhere in this league next year.
Speaking of Tannehill, how do you think the new head coach is going to do with him? How do you think Gase is going to do with him?
The question I have with Tannehill now is his head. It's not so much the physical attributes; it's his head. Like, is he a cancer in the locker room? Like some of the reports suggest.
I mean, yeah, because there was the whole thing with him throwing interceptions to practice squad
Yeah.
players, and Joe Philbin, who was the head coach before he got fired after the 1-3 start, would tell him to go easy on him and stuff like that. But I think that Tannehill got a little bit of a dose of humility with Dan Campbell. I mean, I like Dan Campbell. I mean, I think that he's in New Orleans right now. News just broke. He's the assistant head coach, tight ends right there. I think he kind of brought that, because he told the players to go after each other in practice. So I bet you Tannehill kind of stepped his game up a bit, But, with Adam Gase, I mean, you saw what he did in Denver with Peyton Manning, with Tim Tebow, and then, with Cutler in Chicago. He is an offensive guy, but as a leader of men, commander, I don't know. I just don't know.
Honestly, I don't know much about him. I believe Cutler had probably one of his best seasons.
Oh,
this
yeah.
year,
I mean, Gase
statistically
is good with quarterbacks. I just don't know as leading a whole team, because he'll probably call the plays himself. But I think Miami could have probably gotten somebody maybe a little bit better. I mean, Mike Shanahan interviewed with him. I would have liked to have seen that.
Yeah, I always liked Shanahan. Of course, it didn't work out in Washington, but what he did in Denver, very impressive.
And he did some good things in Washington. You look at some of the players on the roster right now. Trent Williams, who's the best left tackle in all football right now. Kirk Cousins. Ryan Kerrigan.
Yeah.
And bringing in Corey Lichtensteiger, Pierre Garçon via free agency, Jordan Reed. A lot of draft picks of his are contributing. I mean, people forget the kind of job he did here.
Yeah. It's easy to forget. I mean, it wasn't when somebody's not there very long. You do kind of forget about it. And like you said, until you go back and look at the draft and all the other things that go along with wins and losses. Another guy, too, that you were talking about, leader of men, sounds like Todd Haley. Great offensive coordinator. Steelers are doing things, but as a head coach, didn't rub people the wrong way, didn't work out.
And I mean, I thought he did some good things in Kansas City. Got him into the playoffs, but they had some good draft picks there, like Eric Berry, and Justin Houston, two cornerstones.
Oh, absolutely.
But he just never had the respect of the locker room.
Yeah, and I know when he came to Pittsburgh, everybody was thinking he was going to clash with Ben and stuff, and maybe at first they did, but now Ben's having the best years of his career.
Because I know that Mike Tomlin and Roethlisberger weren't happy with the decision to let Bruce Arians go.
No. Which, speaking of Arians, that's another good guy. I'm glad to see him having some success.
It took him a while. I mean, I watched the documentary on him the other day. It took him until the age of 60 to get a head coaching job. And, he was the head coach at Temple, back in the 80s and did some good things. I mean, ultimately that didn't work out, but he bounced around, and he was on a member of a lot of coaching staffs that got fired, and I always thought Arians was a really good offensive mind. I mean, he's a bit of a gambling man. He likes to throw the ball downfield and go for the kill shot. But I thought as like a coach, like he preaches like, perfection and stuff like that. And I thought he did a lot. I mean, I think Arians' guidance is one of the reasons why Roethlisberger, is who he is right now.
Oh, yeah. He definitely took that next step in his career with Arians. I wasn't a big fan of letting him go either, but I mean, I like him. Like I said, I'm glad he's doing some good things in Arizona and with Carson Palmer, and hopefully they can keep winning. But
and another guy that's on your staff that was a former head coach was Mike Munchak. He's done a great job with the offensive line.
Yeah. Oh, that offensive line 2 years ago was a mess.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I think a lot of people sort of do blame Arians for that because they thought the play calling was getting Ben killed. And I was talking to somebody with this the other day. It wasn't that. It was because the Colbert and the front office weren't investing in an offensive line.
Well, and the one thing that changed a little bit under Haley is that, and of course with Ben getting a little bit older too, he doesn't hold the ball like he used to.
Yeah.
I mean, he can still make plays. That's still there. But I think they've encouraged him to not take as many hits. And with Haley's offense, a lot of times you're throwing quick passes. And when you have guys like Antonio Brown that can make plays, after the catch, that works. But Aaron's definitely had a lot to do with Ben improving.
And the other wide receivers, like Marcus Wheaton and stuff like that. And I mean Darius Haywood-Bay is starting to catch some balls.
Bryant.
Yeah.
They have. I was actually debating with one of my friends. Is this receiving core better than the Mike Wallace, Antonio Brown group? When they
I would say yes.
Yeah, he did too, and I kind of agree. When they had to choose basically between paying Wallace or paying Brown, they went Brown. I had just gotten a Wallace jersey, so I was like, Wallace is. I was wrong on that. I'm really glad they went with Brown, and Wallace is bouncing around now.
And and Mike Wallace, was kind of a little bit of a selfish player when he was with Miami. He was always clashing with Tannehill, and and the Minnesota Vikings tried to get Mike Wallace too. At the same time, but they ended up trading for him. After the Dolphins decided to move on from him, but Brown and Wheaton and all those receivers, and I think Heath Miller. I mean, he's starting to slow down a little bit, but he's still a very dynamic tight end. I think the play of D'Angelo Williams has also been very surprising too.
That might be the biggest surprise of the Steelers season is the way D'Angelo Williams has played. I mean, running backs are supposed to be put out to pasture at 30, and he's 32, having like the best year of his career in a while. So
I mean, because when Le'Veon Bell went down, I think a lot of people thought that the running game would go, but I always say D'Angelo Williams started off really well when Bell was coming back. Well, I think he was suspended. Yeah, he was suspended, right. D'Angelo Williams, that first game against the Patriots, he was running the hell out of him, and I think that was probably one of the most unheralded free agent signings that, Colbert and front office got.
It wasn't splashy. For all intents and purposes, everything I hear about D'Angelo Williams, he's a character guy, kind of guy that Pittsburgh would sign as a free agent. But no one expected him to have to do what he's done this year and to do it as effectively as he has. The thing about Bell is you do miss the running game, but it's what he does out of the backfield, catching passes as well. He was probably the most complete running back in the league, which, when Burfict put him out, that's kind of what started that whole thing. So,
and then Burfict hurt Ben in the second game.
Well, and it was the idea when Burfict hurt Bell that he celebrated the play. Now, Burfict's going to say he didn't know if he was injured. I don't know. But that's what started, that's what rubbed everybody the wrong way. And, of course, Shazier put Giovanni Bernard out for Cincinnati Saturday night, and they celebrated on the sideline. Everybody said that was classless. And it was. It's eye for an eye, but that I thought was in response to Le'Veon Bell getting hurt.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously Shazier shouldn't have hit him head to head, but but everyone got on Mike Tomlin a little bit for challenging the play. I mean, sorry, he got hurt, but I mean the guy fumbled the ball, so I'm gonna take a chance and challenge it, and they got the ball back. So
right. You gotta make decisions that are best for your football team, regardless of what other people are gonna think, especially on the road. I mean, obviously it was a good challenge. It worked, but but it was the Bell injury that started this whole bad blood.
But I mean, even going back like to 2005, the bad blood got bad when Kimo Von Olfen hurt Carson Palmer.
Yeah, but you could see remorse right away.
Oh, absolutely.
He knew.
I didn't think it was a dirty hit at all. And because you saw Kimo Von Olfen going, oh, but then Marvin Lewis would come on the field and say he should have been thrown out. And Von Olfen even went up to Palmer and said, I'm sorry, and I know that was a bit of a long rehab, but I mean, Joey Porter, you hear like interviews from him, he's, he defended Von Olfen and said, hey, he went there to make sure he was okay, but and he said the Bengals players, were calling him dirty, and then all of a sudden Joey Porter was like, okay, let's play ball, and maybe he had recollections of that when he went on the field, as a coach.
I think it was an emotional game, and like we kind of talked off air there, that it's not unusual when a player gets hurt, like Brown was hurt, where he's on the ground motionless or knocked out, where players from both teams come out. And I went back to the AFC Championship game a couple years ago, Ryan Clark knocking out Willis McGahee.
Oh, yeah, that one.
That was one of the more vicious hits you'll see. But players, coaches, both teams were out on the field. The stadium was silent. There was genuine concern. And with this, with Burfict being the one to hit Brown, I'm not sure if that happens. Maybe I'll ask you that. If somebody else hits him other than Burfict, or for argument's sake, Pac-Man, one of the other 9 guys hit Brown, knocked him out, do you think that would have happened?
I mean, I still think they probably would have thrown a flag.
Yeah, they would have threw the flag, but the extracurricular, the other 15.
You bring up a very good point there. I think with all the bad blood, maybe it struck a nerve with everybody. Now, if somebody else had hit, like maybe if Pac-Man Jones had hit him that way, they would have gone out there. But, I know that Ray Maluga is a very classy player for the Bengals. If he had hit him, I don't know if that would have triggered the reaction, or Dominic Pecco. But I think you bring up a very good point there. With all the bad blood with Burfict, I think it just set him off.
Yeah. You figure, Burfict hit Bell and celebrated, whether he knew he was hurt or not, I don't know. Tried to take Ben out in December, with the shot to the knee. And then he finally took Brown out. That's the 3-headed monster right there. He was like taking one by one. That's a problem. And I think if anybody doesn't understand why Joey Porter or anybody else would have been irate in that situation, whether he should have been on the field or not, it's not unusual for coaches to be on the field in those situations. Pac-Man, you screwed up.
Yeah.
But,
and you could just hear, you saw the Bengals fan. You could just hear the air getting sucked out of that stadium. And even, this Jim Nantz and Phil Simms were just like, oh, boy. You thought for a minute, and there was even a fight before the game started,
Well, last time in December, they instigated, came across the 50, and, But I think this is the NFL's problem. I think that they're trying to clean up player safety, and it's the methods that they're using. They need to be more defined and more clear on these punishments, because when Burfict was suspended 3 games, they said he's a repeat offender. Okay. He got fined on 3 separate plays in the Pittsburgh-Cincinnati game in December.
Right.
He was a repeat offender in 1 game.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, now the attention is being put on the Max Williams hit for Baltimore, the last game of the year, in addition to the wild card game. And, going back to last year, you had Cam Newton and Greg Olsen for Carolina saying he was trying to break their ankles. How many times till you become a repeat offender?
Yeah.
Like I said, 3 times in 1 game, and he got fined. But what's the magic number to get you suspended?
I think if Burfict probably has another offense, he'll probably be suspended indefinitely.
You would think another offense would probably be 8 games. I almost thought of it as the James Harrison rule when he was putting out people for Cleveland weekly every time they played, when they started this, player with the head injuries and stuff. But I thought at the time it was there was a tier for how you got suspended, but they haven't used it. Very rarely have we seen people suspended. But I think the intent to injure is clear with this guy, and has been through the course of his career. So what's the league going to do,
Yeah. Going back to the Steelers, are you satisfied with the progression of Jarvis Jones?
As a first-round pick, the expectations are going to be high. He's made some plays. I wouldn't cut ties with him yet. I think when he came out, we were expecting a dominant pass rusher. But I think maybe you'd like to see him further advance, but I think he fits the system, and I think he'll continue to improve. It's taken, guys like Lawrence Timmons didn't step on the field, Lamar Woodley, and be instant playmakers either. But I think he'll get another year before they make any decision on what to do with him.
I like Ryan Shazier. I think he's really stepped it up this year, because I know his rookie year he was hurt a lot. Yeah,
Ryan Shazier is another solid draft pick, which, for a place like Pittsburgh, they rely on the draft usually. So it's good to keep that going when you're not going to go out and get free agents because of the cap and everything else. But Shazier has been excellent. That was probably the best game of his career Saturday night.
Well, what's your opinion of Bud Dupree? I know he's a rookie this year, but what do you think of him?
Bud Dupree, well, he's a freak athlete, that's for sure. I'm glad he dropped to us. I think that he's another guy that's going to develop in this system because I know under Dick LeBeau, rookies very rarely started and played significant amount of time. So I think that's kind of continued after LeBeau. But I think all these guys are going to be fine. I mean, if they're all playing to their potential, Shazier, Dupree, and Jones, that's going to be quite a formidable defense.
Yeah, and then you got Cameron Haywood, who's really good.
Hayward's gotten better. Hayward's taken some time to get better, playing behind Kiesel at first. So
now, Shamarko Thomas. I mean, I watch a couple Pittsburgh Steelers games here and there, but has he been getting a lot of playing time?
Well, I didn't come here expecting to hear Shamarko Thomas's name. Primarily special teams. He's a guy that...
Because I know he was a good safety when he was at Syracuse.
He was supposed to be a hitter. Never really progressed to the point where I think they wanted him to, certainly at this point in his career. He's mostly special teams. He gets flagged frequently. So I would say he won't be back next year. But, again, the secondary, I think, is still the weak spot of the Steelers as a team, as a defense. So they're going to have to address that anyway. But I don't think Shamarko will be back.
What do you think the biggest need is for the Pittsburgh Steelers going into the offseason?
As always, corner. Corner. Antoine Blake, I think, was rated the worst corner in football. A guy they're high on. But they need to get that shutdown guy. Like, if they could have got Marcus Peters or somebody like that, they need that. And Ike Taylor, maybe he was never in that class of, shutdown.
But
like
he was really, really good for
He was a solid football player. And I don't think he was ever appreciated enough in Pittsburgh. But that's always until they go out and get somebody. Well, of course, they brought in Brandon Boykin from Philadelphia.
Yeah, and he's gotten no playing time, which, I mean, I know that when the Philadelphia Eagles, when they traded Boykin, everybody in Philadelphia was like, Chip Kelly, what are you doing? I mean, because he was good as a slot corner.
Yeah. His playing time has increased, but when they got him, I thought they'd start him, as bad as our secondary had been. But at the time, they said, secondary's all right without him, I really don't have an answer on that. That's something for Mike Tomlin, why he hasn't been on the field more.
And I think another need Pittsburgh needs is another dynamic tight end because, Heath Miller maybe has 2 or 3 years left in him.
Yeah.
I mean, Matt Spaeth, he's okay. But I just think they need that like a kind of like a Jordan Reed type tight end, that athletic, because that just adds another wrinkle to that offense.
Oh, yeah. That might be about, corner, tight end. You can never have enough offensive linemen, which we haven't even mentioned. Pouncey being out all year.
Yeah. I mean, they've played exceptionally well without him in there.
And they're still thinking he could play this year if they keep winning.
Yeah.
Which would be, pretty miraculous. But
because David DeCastro has been an absolute stud, and Justin Gilbert.
Yeah, the line has exceeded expectations.
And then there's that one guy that was, I think he was in the Army or Navy, the left tackle.
Oh,
number 78.
Villanueva,
right? Yeah, he's been really. They've really been praising him.
Yeah.
Now, what happened to Kelvin Beachum? Did he get hurt, or did he just have his playing time diminished?
Beachum? I don't think he was hurt. I'd have to look that up, though. That was a name I haven't heard in a while either. I don't know. I really don't.
I mean, I don't know. I thought he was decent. I thought my initial thing with Kelvin Beachum is he was very small for a left tackle.
Yes.
Like Villanueva is absolutely humongous.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, what, 6'5", 6'7"?
He's a beast. Well, I think, too, it seemed like as far as offensive linemen go, the league has trended down towards not the 300, 350-pound guys, the smaller, quicker guys to counter faster defensive ends and stuff. And I think the Steelers got on board with that, and I think that's part of why their line's doing so well, and that in continuity.
And then also, Mike Munchak coaching them up.
Oh, Munchak's been great, despite what he did Saturday night. But did you see that?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I know that Adam Jones or Perfect. I think it was Perfect or Adam Jones went up to him.
Yeah, it looked to me like he grabbed the guy by the hair, but they were saying he got his hand caught in his hair. He was trying to prevent him from going after Todman or something. That was such a crazy game. We could do a whole podcast about that game, I think.
But as far as Mike Tomlin, I like Mike Tomlin a lot. I know there was questions about him he was someone on the hot seat last year because the Steelers got off to a bit of a slow start last year,
Yeah.
but then they started picking it up. And I know Dick LeBeau is not there anymore. He's in Tennessee right now, and he's doing okay. Who's the name of your defensive coordinator? I don't know. I don't know at the top of my head.
Keith Butler.
Keith Butler, that's right. He was the linebackers coach last year.
Yes.
I like Keith Butler. I think that maybe another year, maybe he'll start, showing because they're starting to play great defense right now.
Yeah. I think what you have to remember for the Steelers was that the turnover. Like they were transitioning. I mean, Polamalu, Ike Taylor, Ryan Clark, at the time Harrison, even though he's back playing at a pretty high level again.
Larry Foote,
Kiesel, Farrier. They basically
Casey
transitioned.
Hampton.
They transitioned basically an entire defense to in about a 2
and that
or 3
takes
year
a couple
period.
of drafts to get better.
Yeah, and you have to hit. I mean, like we were talking about Jarvis Jones, maybe not where they expected him to be. Bud Dupree's been solid. You have to draft guys. Ryan Shazier, of course, but I don't think you can transition entire defense overnight.
And I think that Shazier and Jarvis Jones and Bud Dupree. I mean, it's like you said, they're probably going to be pretty formidable once they get going. And Cameron Haywood and stuff. And you guys had a pass rushing linebacker last year who had 8 sacks, and he abruptly retired. I thought he was going to be good.
Yeah.
Name's on the tip of my tongue.
Oh, yeah, mine too. Yeah. To be fair though, as far as the Steelers go, they weren't going to bring him back anyway. I think he was slated. Who was he talking to? Oakland or somebody?
Yeah.
Salary cap wise, I don't think he was in the Steelers' plans. But yeah, that was. I think we're going to see that a lot more. How about you?
Yeah, and I think Lamar Woodley. I don't think he's in Oakland right now. I think he might actually be in Arizona with Bruce Arians. So, but I mean, James Harrison has been nothing short of fantastic. He shows that he still has a lot left in the tank. Because I know he went to Cincinnati, a couple of years ago, and that didn't really work out.
No, but what Harrison has given them last year and this year, other than leadership, has been actually solid play. I mean, a lot of guys, you bring them back for leadership purposes, but then you get Harrison who's playing at a high level, but he's been very good. I wanted to ask you too, kind of unrelated to this stuff, but talking about retirement. What about Calvin Johnson? What do you think he's going to do?
We touched about this on the last podcast. I mean, I think he'll come back because I think he has a lot more to offer. He's 30. He's still in his prime. I know he's been dipping a little bit, but the Lions have a tough decision to make because he's going to cost them $24 million in the salary cap next year. So, they have money tied up in Stafford, and Ezekiel Ansah is going to probably get a new contract soon. So, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with Calvin Johnson. I mean, new general manager coming in. I mean, maybe they try to get him to restructure, but I think Calvin Johnson's one of those guys that would not take a pay cut.
I don't think he does in his prime, no. It's been kind of quiet, though, since the end of the season as far as that goes. Like, when the season first ended, he's on 50-50. And, of course, the Barry Sanders thing, But I think the difference between Calvin Johnson and the Barry Sanders situation, I think Detroit has more pieces now than they did with Barry Sanders.
Oh, yeah, they have a loaded team.
Yeah. So, in theory, they could win in Calvin Johnson's in the next 2 or 3 years. But, I don't know.
Some unfortunate news that came out today. Lawrence Phillips, he was the number 6 overall pick of the St. Louis Rams. He died in prison today. He was found unresponsive. He was serving a 35-year prison sentence for aggravated assault, assault with a deadly weapon, auto theft, and he had been recently a prime suspect in the murder of his cellmate, Damian Soward. A lot of people remember him from, his time at the University of Nebraska, in the national title game against Florida in 1996. He rushed for 165 yards and 2 touchdowns and had the receiving touchdown. And, the big thing about Lawrence Phillips, I mean, it's very sad because he had a lot of talent.
Yeah. He's that cautionary tale.
I mean, yeah, and I think he was kind of the start of that cautionary tale. Because it's like you were talking about earlier, Maurice Corlett.
Yeah.
And he's still having some off the field issues too. I mean, granted, there's been a bit of a gap, but Lawrence Phillips just could never shake his inner demons. I think you remember a couple of years ago, Dick Vermeil, when he was hired as the head coach of the Rams in 1997, he really worked hard to try to get Lawrence Phillips, in shape and stuff like that. But, he kind of stormed out of a team meeting when Vermeil cut his playing time. And you remember Dick Vermeil, when he cut him, he cried. He said it was one of the finest running backs he'd ever coached. Went to San Francisco, and he was infamous for blowing a blocked assignment against Aeneas Williams and Steve Young getting the concussion that ultimately ended his career. So,
I guess, some guys you just can't reach. It's sad. It's unfortunate. Phillips seemed like one of those guys. I mean, they have plenty of opportunities. Claret, another one, who seemed to be doing better, I believe, until this most recent.
Yeah, he was playing in the Canadian Football League for a while.
Yeah, I know he's doing like motivational speaking or something with schools. And another guy we've already talked about, Pac-Man Jones.
Yeah.
Another guy that had a lot of off-the-field issues. But yeah, it's very tragic.
And it's just one of those things. It's just the talent. I mean, because everybody had him rated high on their draft boards in 1996.
Oh yeah.
The Baltimore Ravens were predicted to draft him.
Yeah.
And they went and they got Jonathan Ogden, who just happens to be a first ballot Hall of Famer right now. And a lot of other teams wouldn't draft him because of his character issues. When he was in college, he had assault issues too. So, he was almost kicked off the team, but. The head coach at the time, name's on the tip of my tongue, I can't remember, felt that Lawrence Phillips, should stay in the structured environment. Maybe he gets his head right, and it just never worked out.
Right. Yes, and that's what I think. That some guys, you have to want to make those changes, and if you don't, that's how you end up.
Yeah. All right, now we're getting into the final segment of the show, which is Dick's Picks for the week. We have some really exciting games going on. First on Saturday, we have the Chiefs at the Patriots. Who do you like that game?
I hate to say, I think Kansas City can win the game. They play the style of football that other teams that have won in New England in the past have played. But I'm going to go New England.
I am going to go with the Kansas City Chiefs, and I'm going to tell you why. Offensive line versus that ferocious pass rush. And you remember Tom Brady against Miami last week. They thought they were going to walk all over the Dolphins. Well, Ndamukong Suh gave him a high ankle sprain. So imagine going up with a patchwork offensive line. I think they're getting Vollmer back, but I don't think he's even good enough to take on Justin Houston. And granted Houston was a little sluggish last week, but he started catching on Tom Bahali and D Ford and Bailey and Dontari Poe, and with that secondary. I just don't know. I mean, I think New England's defense will keep it close, especially if Macklin's not playing. But I think Kansas City is going to make Tom Brady very uncomfortable in the pocket, and he's going to make mistakes.
That's a solid pick. I want to go with Kansas City. I just think
I know you don't want to bet against Tom Brady, but I'm willing to bet against him this time because that offensive line. They're going to. I think that they're going to put Derek Johnson on Rob Gronkowski, which is a pretty good matchup. I mean, it could be favorable for New England, could be favorable for Kansas City, but, Tom Brady is only going to last so long if he keeps taking a pounding.
Yeah. And that's the way to beat New England, especially this time of year. I mean, that's what Baltimore did when they went up there and upset them. The Giants all the time in the Super Bowl. You just have to get to them and hit them, and Kansas City can certainly do that.
Yeah. And then Green Bay at Arizona. I like Arizona this game. Who do you like?
I'm going Arizona as well.
And I mean, I think it might be a little closer than last game. I mean, because Arizona absolutely embarrassed them last time they played. I mean, I just think collectively the Cardinals are just a better team. I think they've got so many weapons on the offensive side of the ball with Fitzgerald and Floyd and the two Browns and then Carson Palmer. I really like David Johnson, their running back. They have an excellent offensive line, and that defense can get after you.
Yeah. And like we said earlier, Green Bay's not playing consistently right now. Arizona, do you think they'll miss Matthew in that game?
I mean, probably. But, I think that their pass rushers just get home. And they signed Jason Babin this week because they put Okafor on injured reserve.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a bolster move. But, I mean, Dwight Freeney, who's on the wrong side of 30, has 8 sacks this year. And they have a pass rushing specialist who just happens to be 80 years old and who coached in the first Super Bowl game, Kansas City against Green Bay, and he's got those guys playing ball. So,
wow.
I like Arizona. Seattle at Carolina. I like the Panthers.
I'm going to go Seattle on that one.
You see, I don't know. I think that the Seattle played such a sloppy game last weekend, and Carolina went up to Seattle in the regular season and beat them. And I just think Cam Newton's playing at such a high level right now. Devin Funchess, their rookie wide receiver, is coming on at the right time. We know Ginn can, take the top off of defense. Carolina's defense is also incredibly athletic and outstanding, and I think they have better players than Minnesota did. And I just don't think Seattle has the dynamic wide receivers to win that game, especially against Josh Norman and their corners.
Well, I like the experience level. I mean, coming off 2 Super Bowls, I think that there's a level where they want to get back and avenge last year's loss. And it's the playoffs. I mean, they seem to turn it up in the playoffs, and this will be a big pressure spot for Cam Newton to earn some MVP votes.
And then I think the other thing, too, is, Seattle's defense has been good, but not against the high-powered offenses. You look at what, Carolina did to them. You look at what Pittsburgh did. They threw for close to 500 yards and scored 30-plus points.
Yeah.
In the first Arizona game, Arizona put up close to 40 on them. I mean, everyone's going to look at the second game. I don't know if Bruce Arians was necessarily playing all of his horses that game. And they lost to St. Louis twice. They're just
That's amazing.
They're just not a consistent team, and they went into Minnesota and, for all intents and purposes, should have lost that game.
Yeah, they should have. I'm not even sure if Lynch will make that much of a difference, whether he plays or not.
Because they're going to pressure Russell Wilson. They're going to send everybody. So, I like Carolina. And then your boys against Denver.
Well, I think Denver's going to win it.
Oh, well, I thought you were going to pick Pittsburgh that game.
Well, here's why. Okay, I think Ben will play, and it's going to be a matter of how effective is he going to be. If he can't throw the ball 10, 15 yards downfield, like he said at the end of the Cincinnati game, if that's all he can do, and you're not going to run for 183 yards against Denver with Todman and Tucson. So, and then if Antonio Brown doesn't play, or however effective he'll be, I think it's a tall order to go in there against that defense in Denver and pull that out.
And then Denver's got a great defense. They finished number 1 in the league.
Right.
And I think they led the league in sacks too, and they get a lot of turnovers. They have a good secondary. But my thing is, I'm picking Denver, but I think that if you can get to Peyton Manning, you will win that game. It's going to be close. We all know how much you got to Brock Osweiler. Granted, Peyton Manning recognizes blitzes better, but this is not Peyton Manning from 3 years ago. This is Peyton Manning broken down and, can't really do much anymore. I mean, I don't know about Denver being able to run the football.
I think the Steelers defense will keep them in it. They've done pretty well against the run this year. But, and like you said, it's not Manning of a few years ago, but it'll be enough. I find it hard to think that if you cannot throw the ball physically more than 10, 15 yards, or run the ball, the defense is going to have a field day, no matter what scheme you run, no matter what you do. Yeah,
and Denver rushes the passer well. They got Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware and Shane Ray, their first-round pick out of Missouri. I think Missouri, he's starting to come on really well. And Talib and, Chris Harris and Darian Stewart, and T.J. Ward. They're getting guys back,
Yeah.
And, Derek Wolfe is really starting to come on, and Malik Jackson, and Brandon Marshall, their linebackers, and Trevathan and all those guys, they're athletic. I mean, the one reason why you guys beat them, in the regular season is because they couldn't really get much to Ben, and he had all the time in the world to sit back there and just pick them apart.
Yeah, and those were 2 games, the first half, second half, where Pittsburgh shut them out in the second half after, 27-10 at halftime. But maybe Manning can keep them in the game. I just don't. It would be a miracle probably on the level of the Cincinnati game if they pulled that out, especially if they have to start Landry Jones.
I would not be shocked if Pittsburgh won, but I just think Denver is just a better team. But, the one thing that concerns me about Denver is the offensive line. They're a patchwork group. They shuffle guys in and out. They had Tyler Columbus at left tackle the other game, and, he used to play for the Redskins, and he was absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
Ryan Harris, who's a longtime right tackle, is playing left tackle, and and Schofield there, who starts at right tackle from time to time. He's been awful all year. Evan Mathis hasn't really seen the field much, and they got him from the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like Denver that game. I think they'll win, but it's going to be very close, and I think whoever makes the fewest mistakes is going to win.
Yeah, that's probably accurate. And you know what? After the Cincinnati game, I guess anything's possible. But, you could be setting up for one last Brady Manning AFC Championship game, too.
Yeah.
Which...
I like Kansas City at Denver for the AFC title game.
Yeah, you said, yeah.
All right, well, we have come to the conclusion of our show. Thanks, you all, for... joining us for the DMV NFL show. I'm Richard Brown. If you'd like to be a guest analyst on the show, please email at executivedirector.fgs@gmail.com and put in the subject line, guest analyst. That's executivedirector.fgs@gmail.com, guest analyst subject line. Brandon, thank you for coming.
Hey, thanks for having me.